My name was Grace. At least it used to be. Now when I look at the papers, my house papers, the land certificate, even the family trust, I don't see my name anymore. It's like I never existed. It happened on a quiet Wednesday morning. I remember the sun was out, and I had just finished sweeping the front porch. Margaret, my neighbor, had brought over some warm bread, and we sat under the mango tree like we always did on Wednesdays. That's when the letter arrived. A man in a black suit handed it to me with a blank face. "Mrs. Sorry, who should I address this to?" he asked, looking confused. I reached for the envelope. It was from a law firm I had never heard of. I opened it with shaking hands. My eyes scanned the first few lines, and my knees gave out. I had been removed from the family property deed. The house I built with my late husband, Peter. The farmland we planted together for 20 years. Even the family business. Everything now legally belonged to my son David, his wife Linda, and my granddaughter Clara. They had erased me, not just from the house, but from my life. I sat there in silence, the letter trembling in my hands. "Grace, what's wrong?" Margaret leaned in, but I couldn't speak. I turned the page over, hoping it was a mistake. A typo. Some legal confusion. But at the bottom, there were signatures. David's. Linda's. Even Clara's. But not mine. I had never signed this. Never agreed to it. And yet it was done. The final line of the letter read, "All assets and titles have been transferred. The former matriarch has been listed as a non-dependent, with no legal claim or right of return." Non-dependent? No legal claim? I was being kicked out of my own story. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall, not yet. I stood up slowly, my legs heavy, my chest tight. I walked into the house, my house, and everything suddenly felt cold. The couch I had bought with my first sewing income. The curtains Peter had picked out. The photo frame of our 25th anniversary on the wall. Gone. It was gone. And that's when I saw the boxes. Packed. Labeled. And sitting by the front door. Someone had been preparing for this, behind my back. Margaret followed me in. "Grace, talk to me. What's going on?" I showed her the letter. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. Grace, they can't do this to you." But they already had. I walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet. My special teacup, the one Peter gave me on our 30th anniversary, was missing. I checked the drawers. All my things had been moved, boxed up, like I was some visitor overstaying my welcome. Then I saw a note taped to the fridge. "Mom, don't take this the wrong way. We love you, but it's time for the next phase of life. We'll help you find a small room somewhere. Clara will visit sometimes. Please don't make this harder than it already is." I sank to the floor. So this was the love they spoke of. This was my reward after giving my life to them. I had cooked, cleaned, babysat, cried, prayed, sacrificed. I had sold my jewelry to pay Clara's school fees. I had stayed up nursing David through fevers, and helped Linda when she had her surgery. And now they were helping me find a small room somewhere. Somewhere that was not my home. Margaret knelt beside me, holding my shoulders. "No. We're not going to let this happen," she said firmly. But I couldn't speak. Because the part that hurt the most was that they did it quietly, behind closed doors. And they smiled in my face while they did it. I was still on the floor when I heard the front door open. David walked in. "Mom," he said, surprised to see me sitting there. "You got the letter?" I stood slowly, my voice shaking. "You did this." He looked away. "It's complicated." "No. It's not. You took everything from me. Even my name." He sighed. "You wouldn't understand. Times are changing. We needed to restructure the estate." "The estate?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean our home? My home? The land Peter and I built from nothing? You mean the legacy your father left me?" He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't get it. You're old now. You don't need all this." That broke me. "You're old now." That one sentence shattered everything I still had left. I stepped back. Margaret stood beside me, fuming. "You don't need all this," David repeated. "We'll put you in a place that's comfortable. You won't have to worry." But I already was worrying. Because I didn't just lose a house that day. I lost my identity. I lost my name. And as I stood there in the ruins of what used to be my life, I looked David in the eye and said the last thing I ever thought I'd say to my son. I may be old, but I'm not dead. And I'm not done. That night, I packed my bag and left with Margaret. No plan. No money. Just pain and a tiny spark of fire still left inside me. But as I closed the gate behind me, I saw Clara watching from the window upstairs. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. And that's when I knew. This betrayal ran deeper than I thought. Margaret didn't speak as we walked down the street under the night sky. The only sound was my slippers brushing against the gravel and the echo of my broken breathing. We had walked halfway to her house before she finally asked, "Where will you go now?" I looked up at the moon full and bright, shining on me like it still remembered my name. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I can't go back there." Her house was small, just 2 rooms and a creaky old roof. But that night it felt warmer than the place I had once called home. She laid a blanket on the floor for me and gave me a warm cup of ginger tea. I sat there silently trying to remember how I got here. How did a woman like me, who gave everything to her family, become someone they wanted to erase? I closed my eyes and went back in time. Back to the beginning. I was 19 when I married Peter. He was a kind man with big dreams and rough hands from working on the farm. We didn't have much, but we built our life brick by brick. He respected me, made me feel like I mattered. And when David was born, Peter cried like a baby. That's how much family meant to him. We had 2 daughters after David, Mary and Elsie. But David was the first, the pride of his father. Peter taught him everything. How to plant yam. How to fix a roof. How to save money. And when Peter died, I thought David would carry on that legacy. I never imagined he'd be the one to bury it. As I lay there on the floor in Margaret's sitting room, I stared at the wooden ceiling above me. I thought of the times I rocked David to sleep when he had nightmares. The time I sold my golden chain to pay his school fees. The day I used the last money I had to buy him a birthday cake because he cried in class when the teacher asked why he never had one. I did it all because I loved him. Now he was telling me I was old. That I no longer needed all this. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, I was up before the rooster crowed. Margaret was already making breakfast, cassava and fried plantain. The smell made my stomach growl, but I couldn't eat. My chest still felt too heavy. "You should see a lawyer," Margaret said as she handed me a cup of warm water. "They can't just wipe you off like that." I smiled weakly. "You think I can afford a lawyer?" She hesitated. Then she stood up and disappeared into her room. When she came back, she held out a small envelope. Inside were some Naira notes folded neatly. "I've been saving this for years," she said. "You helped me when John passed. Let me help you now." Tears stung my eyes.
No, Margaret.
"I can't." "You can and you will," she said firmly. "It's not just for you. It's for every woman who gave her all and got thrown away like trash." That day we went to town. We found a lawyer. A quiet, smart man named Mr. Thomas who looked at me with kind eyes. After listening to everything I told him, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You may have a case. But it depends. Did you sign anything?" "No," I said. "Not a thing." "Did your husband leave a will?" I nodded. "Yes. Peter had everything written down. He said the house and land were for me until I passed. Then David could have it." He raised his eyebrows. "And do you have a copy of the will?" I froze.
No.
"David kept it." Mr. Thomas sighed. "Then we'll need to get it. If the will still exists and says what you claim, we can fight this." We left his office with a new kind of energy. A tiny flicker of hope. But that flicker didn't last long. Because just as we reached the edge of the market, I saw Linda, David's wife, shopping, smiling, laughing like she didn't just help destroy my life. She saw me too. And she didn't look ashamed. She walked over, her face calm like it was just any other day. "Mother," she said, "I hope you're doing well." "Why, Linda?" I asked quietly. "Why did you do this to me?" Her smile never left her face. "We didn't do anything wrong. We just made the right decisions for the family." "You took my name," I said. "You erased me." She leaned in, her voice cold. "You had your time, Grace. It's our turn now. Stop holding on to what's already passed." I looked at her and realized something terrifying. She truly believed that. To her, I wasn't a mother. I was a placeholder, a tool that had outlived its use. I turned and walked away, but every step felt like I was dragging a chain behind me. Back at Margaret's, I sat down slowly, my knees aching, my heart aching even more. How do you fight people who feel no shame? I whispered. Margaret didn't answer. She just took my hand. That night, I decided to go back to my old home. Not to stay, but to search. If Peter's will was there, I had to find it. So when the moon was high and the streets were quiet, I wrapped my shawl tightly and walked through the dark, dusty road. When I reached the house, I stood outside the gate, staring. The lights were off. No one seemed to be awake. I climbed over the back fence. My feet landed softly in the garden Peter once tended with joy. I tiptoed to the back window, the one that led into my old room. It was slightly open. I pushed it gently and slid inside. Everything was different. They had painted the walls, changed the curtains. My picture with Peter was gone. But I remembered something. Peter kept his documents in a wooden box under our old bed. I knelt, heart pounding, and reached under the bed frame. There it was. Dusty but still there. I pulled it out with trembling hands. And just as I opened the box, I heard a creak. Footsteps. Someone was in the house. The footsteps got louder. Each one echoed in my ears like thunder. My breath caught in my throat. I froze on the floor, still holding the wooden box. Then I heard a familiar voice. Clara, did you lock the back window? I thought I heard something. It was Linda. I panicked. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it would give me away. I didn't have time to run. I had only one choice. I slid under the bed and pulled the blanket halfway down to cover the space. Just in time. The bedroom door creaked open. Light spilled into the room. I held my breath as Linda stepped in, her slippers tapping softly against the tiled floor. She walked around slowly, looked out the window, then shook her head. Must be the wind, she mumbled to herself. She stood there for a moment, checking her reflection in the mirror and adjusting her nightgown. My chest tightened. I was only inches away from her feet. One wrong move, one cough, and she'd find me. Finally, she yawned and turned around. Her footsteps faded down the hallway, and after a while, I heard the door close behind her. I didn't move. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then 20. Only then did I dare to crawl out. I clutched the wooden box to my chest like it was a newborn child. Slowly, quietly, I tiptoed back to the window and slipped out the way I came. The night air hit my face, cool and sharp like a slap. But I was free. I ran all the way to Margaret's house. My knees ached and my heart raced, but I didn't stop. I barged into her sitting room and dropped the box onto the floor. I found it, I said breathlessly. Margaret gasped and rushed over. Together we opened the box and searched. Old photos. Peter's birth certificate. A letter from our wedding day. Then at the very bottom there it was. The will. Peter's handwriting, neat and firm. We read it together. To my beloved wife, Grace, I leave our home, our farmland, and all that we built together. She shall own and live in this house until her passing. Only then shall our son David inherit it. I trust he will honor this. I couldn't hold back the tears. Peter hadn't forgotten me. He had protected me. And now I had proof. The next morning, we rushed to Mr. Thomas, the lawyer. He carefully examined the will, flipping each page like it was gold. This changes everything, he said. This will make their transfer invalid. They had no right to take you off anything. I nodded slowly, wiping my tears. But will the court believe me? He looked up, his eyes serious. It's not about belief anymore. It's about facts. And this, he held up the will, is the strongest fact we have. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to hope again. But that hope didn't last long. 2 days later, Margaret received a letter at her home. It was from David's lawyer. I opened it with shaky hands and read, "Due to your unlawful entry and removal of private property from the estate, we are issuing a restraining order. You are to stay 100 meters away from the family residence at all times. Failure to do so will result in criminal charges." I stared at the paper in disbelief. "They're accusing you of stealing from your own home?" Margaret cried out. They're trying to silence me, I whispered. They know I have the will, and they're afraid. Mr. Thomas wasn't shaken. Let them try. We'll file a counterclaim and take this straight to court. But still, I couldn't sleep that night. How could David do this to me? How could he turn my love into something so ugly? And Clara. She used to braid my hair while sitting on my lap. She would draw pictures and write, "I love you, Grandma," in pink crayon. Now she signs legal documents to erase me. What had happened to them? Had I failed as a mother? As a grandmother? The next morning, I stood outside the courthouse with Mr. Thomas and Margaret. We were ready to file the case. But as we reached the steps, a white SUV pulled up. David stepped out. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a tall man in sunglasses, a private security guard. Linda followed, dressed in a fancy red suit like she was on her way to a party, not a legal battle. Clara walked behind them, her arms folded, face cold. They all saw me. David came close and whispered, "You should have stayed quiet." I didn't blink. "And you should have stayed decent." He gave a smirk. "Let's see who wins." Then with his entourage he walked into the building. Margaret squeezed my hand. I swallowed hard and said, "I may be old, but I'm not afraid." Inside the courtroom the battle began. Documents were filed. Voices were raised. And as I sat there, clutching Peter's will, I realized something. This wasn't just about land. It wasn't even about money. It was about legacy. They had taken my home, my place, my name. But now I was taking it back. I was ready to fight, not just for me, but for every woman who was ever told she was too old, too soft, too quiet to matter. And just as I was about to stand and speak, the judge called for a short recess. I stepped into the hallway to breathe, only to find Clara waiting there. She looked at me for a long time. And then she said something that chilled me to the bone. "Grandma, we did worse than you think." My heart stopped for a moment. I looked straight into Clara's eyes, trying to read what she meant. My sweet granddaughter, the one I raised, fed, bathed, prayed for, stood there with a blank face, like she wasn't even talking to her own blood. "What did you say?" I whispered. Clara's voice was calm, too calm. "We did worse than just take your name off the documents." My chest tightened. "Clara, what did you do?" She looked around the hallway and took a small step closer. "I shouldn't even be telling you this. But I want you to stop. I want all this fighting to end. You're not going to win." "Win?" I gasped. "You think this is a game?" "It's not a game," she said. "But it's already done. You were erased months ago. The will. That's not even the only thing we touched." My knees grew weak. "What else?" Clara paused for a moment, then said in a whisper, "We changed Peter's bank documents. We moved all the savings before we had the house signed over." I shook my head. "No. No, your grandfather left that account for emergencies. He told me it was for the family if anything ever happened." Clara nodded. "It was. But Dad and Mom used the money to invest in the new estate in Riverstone. That's how we got the new business license. That's how we paid for my tuition." "You used the emergency fund?" "Without telling me." "It was already in Dad's name," she said flatly. "And we couldn't wait for you to understand. You're too emotional, Grandma. You live in the past." I felt like the floor moved under my feet. "Then why are you telling me this now?" I whispered, my throat dry. Clara hesitated. "Because I see you fighting. And honestly, it's tiring. We just want to move on. And I'm tired of pretending." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You're tired? You," I said. "You've only lived 22 years. I raised you, girl. I washed your diapers. I carried you on my back when your feet were too small for the market. And you're telling me you're tired?" She blinked, and for a second I thought I saw a flicker of shame. But it disappeared quickly. The court officer called for everyone to return. Clara turned and walked away without another word. I stood frozen, feeling the sting of betrayal crawling through my bones like cold wind. Inside the courtroom, the lawyer representing David began presenting their documents. Lies coded in legal language. "Your Honor, the plaintiff, Grace Thompson, has no legal ownership under the current title. She has not contributed financially to the property in over 15 years. and the transfer was done with full consent of all parties involved. I stood up. That's a lie. I was never told. I never signed anything. The judge banged his gavel. You will have your time to speak. When it was our turn, Mr. Thomas stepped forward with calm confidence. He showed Peter's original will. He explained the deception. He revealed how the land, the house, and the business were never meant to be handed over while I was still alive. The judge listened. He was quiet. Too quiet. At the end of the session, the judge leaned forward and said, "This matter is not only a legal one, it is a moral one. The final hearing will be set for next month. Until then, no changes to ownership or titles are to be made." We walked out of the courtroom into the afternoon sun. Margaret squeezed my hand. We made progress today, but I didn't feel like celebrating, because Clara's words haunted me. We did worse than you think. That night, I lay awake on Margaret's floor again. My back ached. My heart ached even more. Then I remembered something. Peter used to keep a hidden journal. He called it the legacy book. He wrote in it almost every week. His dreams. His goals. His worries about David growing cold. His ideas for how to secure our family's future. Maybe, just maybe, there was something in there. Something that could prove how he felt about me. Something that would back up the will. Something David and Linda didn't know about. I sat up in the dark and whispered, "Margaret, we need to go back again." She turned in her sleep. What? Peter's journal. It might still be hidden in the old toolbox in the shed. They wouldn't think to look there. "Grace," she said sleepily, "you'll get yourself arrested." I don't care anymore. I got up, dressed, and tucked the will into my blouse. An hour later, we were standing outside the old shed behind the house. I forced the door open with a small crowbar Margaret borrowed from her cousin. The hinges screamed, but we slipped inside. The air was thick with dust and memories. There in the corner, under an old tire, was Peter's green toolbox. I opened it, and there it was. The journal. Worn, cracked, but still whole. I opened to the first page. If anything ever happens to me, Grace must never be left without a place to call home. She is my soul, my partner, and the reason this family stands. I clutched the book to my chest and wept. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, and a voice barked from behind us. "Who's in there?" A security guard stepped into the shed with a big stick. I froze. "Get out. Now," Margaret shouted. "Wait. Wait. We were just..." He lunged toward us. We turned and ran. As we scrambled out of the shed and into the night, I heard him shout, "I'm calling the police." We ran through the darkness like two scared children, our slippers slapping the wet ground, our breath ragged and sharp. Margaret held her wrapper with one hand and my arm with the other, dragging me along even when my legs threatened to give out. Behind us, the night guard's voice echoed, "Come back here. You're trespassing." But we didn't stop. Not until we reached the edge of the bush path that led to her compound. Once we were out of sight, we bent over, both of us panting. I clutched Peter's journal to my chest like it was my last piece of breath. "Are you okay?" Margaret asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "I should be," I replied, my voice shaking. "But I'm not. I'm tired, Margaret. Tired of fighting. Tired of proving I matter to people who once lived under my wings." We got back into her home just before dawn broke. The rooster crowed like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't an old woman being hunted like a thief for trying to protect her own name. Margaret sat me down and gave me water. I opened the journal again with trembling fingers. Page after page, Peter's love poured through his words. Grace carried this family. Even when I was weak, she was strong. If David forgets her value, then I have failed as a father. Another entry read, "I fear Linda's influence on David. He's not the same anymore. If anything happens to me, Grace must be protected. I trust her more than anyone." I burst into tears. My husband, he saw it coming. Somehow he knew. "Margaret," I whispered, "they erased my name, but they can't erase his words." By noon, we took both the will and the journal to Mr. Thomas. His eyes widened as he read Peter's words. "This journal, this changes everything," he said. "This shows clear intent. It will back up the will in court and challenge their false documents." "But will the court believe it?" I asked. They will, he assured me. Because this isn't just emotional writing. It's a testament, a voice from the grave. And no one can silence that. Just as he finished speaking, his secretary knocked on the door. Sir, you have a visitor. The door opened. And David walked in. My heart dropped. He looked at me like I was a stranger, then turned to Mr. Thomas. I came to offer a solution, he said coldly. I glared at him. You're not here to make peace. You're here because you're scared. He ignored me and handed Mr. Thomas a paper. We're offering her a small settlement. Cash. Enough for her to live in comfort somewhere else. But she gives up all claims to the house and land. I stood up slowly. You want to pay me to disappear? I said, trembling. After I gave you everything? After I wiped your tears, fed you with my own hands, and watched your father die while holding mine? David didn't flinch. I'm giving you a chance to walk away with something. You'll lose in court. We have newer titles and the system favors us now. Mr. Thomas folded his arms. Your mother has a will and a journal. You have greed and lies. Let's see what the system favors. David scoffed, then looked at me. Take the offer, mother. Because once we win, you'll be left with nothing. Not even your name. Then he walked out. I didn't cry. Not this time. Because I realized something. David wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of the truth. Later that night, Margaret and I sat outside under the stars. I never thought my own child would treat me like an enemy, I said. I carried him in my womb, gave him life, and now he wants me gone like I'm a weed growing where it doesn't belong. Margaret nodded. You are not alone, Grace. Many mothers carry wounds like yours. But yours is fresh, deep, and loud. I looked at the sky and whispered. When did love turn into betrayal? Then I heard my phone buzz. A message. It was from Clara. Just one sentence. Grandma, I found something. Please meet me tomorrow alone. Don't tell anyone. My fingers froze over the screen. Margaret leaned over. What is it? I showed her the message. Her eyes narrowed. Do you think it's a trap? I shook my head. I don't know. But if there's a chance she's still my granddaughter, if there's still one drop of truth left in her, I have to go. And as I lay down to sleep that night, the question hung over me like a heavy cloud. What did Clara find? And why did she reach out now? The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual. The sky was gray, and the birds didn't sing like they used to. It was like even the heavens knew something was about to change. I wore my old brown shawl, the one Peter gave me during our 30th anniversary, and tied my scarf tightly around my head. I didn't know what to expect from Clara, but I was ready. Margaret begged me not to go alone. Let me come with you, she said, grabbing her shoes. I shook my head. She said I should come alone. And I need to hear it from her without anyone else around. Maybe there's still a piece of the little girl I raised left in her. We agreed to meet in the old park, the one where I used to take Clara when she was just 4. I remember her tiny hands holding my fingers, her eyes lighting up every time she saw butterflies. But today those memories felt like lies. When I arrived at the park, Clara was already sitting on the old green bench. She had her arms folded, her shoulders hunched like someone carrying a heavy secret. I approached her slowly. She didn't look up. Clara, I said gently. She finally turned. Her eyes were red. Grandma. I'm sorry. I paused. That word sorry held so much weight. Yet I didn't know if it was real or another trick. She took a deep breath and reached into her bag. I didn't know they were going to do all this, she said. I knew they'd change the papers. I heard things at night. Dad and Mom talking about taking over early and removing the old woman from the picture. But I didn't think they'd actually erase your name.
Esther here.
She looked so young, so broken. I found this last night, she said, handing me a brown envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a photocopy of another document, Peter's power of attorney, dated 3 months before he passed. It clearly showed my name, legally giving me control over his decisions if he became too ill to manage. This is real? I asked. Clara nodded. They never submitted it. They hid it after he died. If you show this in court, it'll prove everything. You had legal authority when they stole everything from you. Tears filled my eyes. I touched her hand gently. Why now, Clara? Why come to me now? She bit her lip. Because last night I saw an old photo in the drawer. You were holding me on your lap. I was laughing, you were smiling. I remembered how safe I felt with you. Her voice cracked. I don't know when we became like this. I miss you. My heart squeezed. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to forgive her right there. But I also knew that truth needed more than just words. Clara, I said, if you're really sorry, then testify in court. Tell the judge what you heard. Show them this paper and speak the truth. She froze. Testify. Yes, I said firmly. That's the only way to fix this. She looked away. Dad will never forgive me. I stood. Then you have to decide what matters more. Doing what's easy or doing what's right. She didn't answer. I left her sitting there. When I returned home to Margaret's place, I gave the new document to Mr. Thomas. His eyes widened as he read it. This seals it, he said. With this and the will and the journal, there's no way the court can deny your case now. I smiled weakly, but inside I felt sick, because I still didn't know if Clara would stand with me. The next week, court resumed. David walked in like a king. Linda followed, cold as ever. I sat quietly with my papers, breathing slowly, praying Peter's spirit would sit beside me. The judge called the room to order. And then the door opened. Clara stepped in. Everyone turned. She walked to the front, holding the envelope tight in her hands. Your Honor, she said, I have something to submit. Gasps filled the room. David's face turned pale. Linda jumped from her seat.
Clara, no.
David barked. But she looked straight at the judge. My grandmother is telling the truth. My parents hid this. And I can no longer be part of it. She handed over the power of attorney. The judge raised his brows, examined the document, and nodded slowly. I'll need time to verify this, but this could change the entire ruling. Linda stormed out of the room. David sat with his head in his hands. And I? I finally breathed again. Outside the courtroom, I met Clara under a tree. I'm proud of you, I said softly. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I just hope it's not too late. I touched her cheek. Truth never comes late. It comes when it's needed most. Just then my phone rang. It was Margaret. Her voice was shaking. Grace, you need to come home now. What happened? I asked. There was a pause. They've broken into my house. Someone's ransacked your things. The journal. The documents, they're gone. My heart stopped. Gone. No. Not now. I turned to Clara. They've taken everything. Clara's eyes widened.
No, Grandma.
They're trying to destroy the case. I whispered. We need to get back now. Before they wipe me out completely. We rushed back to Margaret's house, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I had thought the worst was over, but I was wrong. When we arrived, the front door was already wide open. The lock was broken. Inside, drawers were tossed on the floor, papers ripped, clothes scattered like garbage. It was like a storm had passed through, but one with a clear target. Peter's journal, the power of attorney, the original will, all gone. I stood there frozen. My breath caught in my chest. I felt like I was drowning, like the air itself had turned into water and was pressing down on my lungs. Margaret stood beside me, tears forming in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Grace. I should have kept them in a safer place. I didn't think. It's not your fault, I said quickly, holding back my tears. This is David. This is Linda. They're not just fighting me in court. They're trying to erase me from history. Clara, who had followed behind us, stepped forward slowly, looking around in horror. I didn't think they'd go this far. I didn't know. You still have a copy of the power of attorney? I asked her desperately. She shook her head. I gave you the only one. I was scared to keep another. What if they searched my room? I collapsed into the nearest chair. My legs unable to hold me anymore. Then it's over. No, Clara said, kneeling in front of me. It's not. Her voice was firm now, not shaky like before. I'm going to court again. I'll speak up, louder this time. I'll tell them everything. And we'll get the copies reissued from the bank, from the lawyer's office, anything. We won't give up now. I looked into her eyes. There was fire in them. That's when I saw a flicker of the little girl I raised. The one who used to run to me with scraped knees, looking for comfort. The next morning, we went to Mr. Thomas. When we told him everything, he was shocked but not surprised. They're getting desperate, he said. But don't worry, Grace. I filed a certified copy of the will with the court. And the journal? I scanned parts of it after you brought it in. They didn't steal everything. Hope stirred again in my chest. They'll do anything to stop this, I said. He nodded. But the law is catching up with them. And with Clara's testimony, we have something even stronger, truth. The final hearing was approaching. Just 2 days away. That evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset, Clara came to sit beside me. Grandma, she said softly, can I ask you something? Of course, I replied. If the court gives you back the house, will you come back? Will you forgive us? I looked at her carefully. Forgiveness is not easy, Clara. You saw me suffer. You were part of the silence. And silence can be just as loud as shouting. She lowered her head. I know. And I hate myself for it. But, I continued, you're trying now. You're speaking up. That counts. And yes, I want to come home. But not just to walls and furniture. I want my family back. She started crying. I miss you, Grandma. I held her hand. Then let's fix this. One truth at a time. That night I didn't sleep. My eyes stayed open watching shadows move across the walls. Every creak made me jump. Every sound outside felt like another threat. I kept the scanned documents next to me, clutched tight like they were my last breath of justice. Then, around 2 a.m., a knock. Not a soft one. A heavy, angry knock on Margaret's door. My heart skipped. Margaret got up slowly and whispered, "Don't answer." But the knock came again. And then a voice. David's. I know you're inside, Ma. Come out. I froze. What does he want now? Clara whispered from the other room. Then David's voice again, louder. Come out now, or I'll make this worse for you. You think a scan paper will save you? You think you've won. Margaret grabbed her phone and started calling the police. Leave or I'll call the law. She shouted through the door. But David kicked the door, once, twice. It cracked. Clara screamed from the back room. I clutched the arm of the chair, my whole body shaking. Then, boom. The door burst open. David stepped in, his eyes wild. And in that moment, everything I had tried to protect, the truth, the memories, my dignity, was now under threat. The door slammed against the wall as David stormed in, his chest rising and falling like a man possessed. His eyes, red and sharp, landed on me first. There you are, he growled. I warned you, didn't I? Margaret stood between us with her phone still in her hand. I've already called the police. They're on their way. Leave before you make this any worse. But David didn't even blink. He stepped forward, pointing at me. You just couldn't stop, could you? You couldn't sit down and grow old in peace. You just had to stir everything up. I rose slowly to my feet. My hands were trembling, but my voice, it came out steady. I stirred up nothing, David. I simply stood up for myself, for what your father left in my care, for what I spent my whole life building with him, and for what you tried to erase. Clara appeared behind him in the doorway, her eyes wide. Dad, please stop. This isn't the way. He turned on her. And you. You're no better. You betrayed your family for this old woman. You think I don't know what you've done? Sneaking papers, running your mouth in court. I stood for the truth, she shouted, her voice breaking. That's what you forgot, Dad. That truth matters. David lunged toward her, but I stepped in the way. Don't you touch her. I yelled. He froze for a second, maybe stunned that I could still raise my voice like that. But then, flashing red and blue lights flooded the front of the house. Police sirens. A voice outside shouted. Police! Open up. David backed up, startled. You called them on me? He hissed. Margaret didn't flinch. Yes, and I'd do it again if it means protecting Grace. Within seconds, 2 officers burst through the door. David raised his hands but kept shouting. She's lying. She's the one who broke into the shed. She's stealing from us. She's trying to take our house. The officers held him back. One turned to me and asked calmly, Ma'am, Do you have proof of ownership or a report filed? Mr. Thomas, who had rushed over after Clara called him secretly, stepped through the door just in time, holding the printed documents. I'm her lawyer. Everything you need is here. They handcuffed David, reading him his rights as he screamed down the hallway. This isn't over. You'll all regret this. But I knew. It was almost over. The next few days moved like a storm slowing down. The judge reviewed Clara's testimony. The scanned documents were examined and verified. The power of attorney, the will, the journal entries, Peter's words became my armor. Then finally, the court summoned all of us for the final ruling. I stood up in court, head high, hands still trembling from everything we had been through. The judge looked me in the eye and said, Mrs. Grace Thompson, this court acknowledges your legal rights as the surviving spouse, caretaker, and rightful inheritor of your husband's estate. The property, assets, and name that were unjustly removed from you will be restored. You are, by this court, fully recognized as the legal owner and custodian of the Thompson legacy. I closed my eyes. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not because I won, but because justice finally spoke. Outside the courtroom, Clara ran into my arms and hugged me tight. I'm sorry for everything, Grandma, she whispered. I will spend the rest of my life making it right. And I believed her. We went back home, my home. It was quiet, dusty, cold, but it was still standing. And so was I. The next few weeks were filled with repairs, not just of the house but of hearts. Clara moved in with me for a while. Margaret came by every day. Slowly, laughter returned to the old kitchen. The garden began to bloom again. But not everything healed. David and Linda never spoke to me again. And that was a wound I would carry for the rest of my life. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Clara, watching the sun go down, she asked me softly, Do you ever wish you gave up instead of fighting? I smiled faintly.
No.
Because if I had, I would have lost more than a house. I would have lost myself. She held my hand and said, You are the strongest woman I know.
No, Iraplia.
I'm just a mother who refused to be forgotten. And now, even if they took everything, my place, my bed, my name, they couldn't take who I am. I woke up that morning feeling like a stranger in my own home. Yes, the court gave me back the house. The papers were back in my name. Clara had returned to me. And justice, for once, had stood beside an old woman. But deep in my chest, something still ached. Some wounds don't bleed on the outside. They bleed silently inside the heart. I walked through the hallway slowly, my fingers brushing over the old family portraits that had once hung proudly. Peter's photo was still on the wall. My son David's school portrait was next to it. I stared at it for a long time. How did you turn into this? I whispered. The silence didn't answer. In the kitchen, Clara was already up. She'd been staying with me for the past few days, helping me settle back in. Every morning she cooked, cleaned, and smiled like she was trying to make up for all the years she didn't call me Grandma. But this morning she looked worried. What's wrong? I asked her. She hesitated. I got a message from Mom. I sat down slowly. Linda. The name alone was like a bitter taste in my mouth. She wants to meet you, Clara said carefully. She says she has something you need to hear. Something about Dad.
Ister here.
Is this a joke? After everything they did to me? After they broke the door, stole the will, erased my name, and tried to throw me on the street. Now she wants to talk. Clara nodded. She said it's urgent. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't trust Linda. I never did. From the moment she married David, I felt something cold behind her smile, like a hand ready to take everything the moment you looked away. But something inside me whispered, Go. If I didn't hear what she had to say, I'd always wonder. So that afternoon, Clara and I took a quiet drive to a small cafe just outside town. It was empty. Only one other person sat there, Linda. She looked different. Not the proud, sharp woman I remembered. Her eyes were sunken, her hair tied back in a loose bun. She looked tired. She didn't even greet me. She slid a brown envelope across the table. What's this? I asked. David didn't tell you everything, she said. You think he did all this out of greed. But he had reasons. Wrong reasons. But they started with something your husband did. I frowned. Don't speak about Peter, I warned her. He was a good man. Linda nodded. Maybe, but there's something in that envelope. Letters. Notes. Things David found after Peter died. Secrets he never told you. Things that made him angry enough to want to take everything from you. I opened the envelope slowly, my hands shaking again. Inside were yellowed letters, some from Peter and some to Peter. From a woman named Elsie. Clara leaned over. Who's Elsie? I didn't answer, because my heart had just dropped. Elsie was Peter's first love. A name I hadn't heard in 40 years. One of the letters read, Peter, I still love you. Even though you're married to Grace now, I know you think of me. And I kept your secret. David can never know. My lips parted in shock. Clara looked at me confused. Grandma, what does that mean? I shook my head slowly, reading on. David must never find out you are not his real father. I kept your name on his birth certificate to protect him. But he's starting to ask questions. Please come visit him again, even if Grace doesn't know. My vision blurred. I dropped the letter. Clara picked it up and stared at me. Grandma, what is this? I covered my mouth with my hand. I couldn't breathe, because in one moment everything changed. David, the son I raised, might not have been Peter's child. And Peter never told me. Linda finally looked me in the eye. He found those letters when he was clearing your attic. That's when he changed. That's when he started to hate you. He thought you knew. That you lied to him all his life. I stood up dizzy. I didn't know, I whispered. I didn't know any of this. Clara held my hand. Linda whispered. I hated you too, Grace. For being silent. But now, I wonder if you were just another victim of this family's secrets. I stumbled outside. The air hit my face like cold water. I looked at the sky. My whole life was spinning again. The house I got back. The name I reclaimed. And now, the son I thought was mine in every way, may not even be Peter's child? Or worse, was David even mine at all? I sat alone in the quiet of the garden that evening. The sky above me was pale and tired, just like I felt inside. The wind danced softly with the old curtains, and the house that once felt warm now felt like a stranger's place again. My hands shook as I held the letters. I had read them all now. Each one telling me that the man I loved, the man I built my whole life with, had been hiding something so big, so deep, that it changed everything. David may not be Peter's son. But more than that, one letter suggested something even worse. It hinted that David may not even be my own child. One sentence read, the baby is here. Healthy. I gave him to the nurse just before Grace arrived. She'll never know. I had no choice. They would have taken him from me. My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't from Peter. It was from Elsie to someone named Beatrice. I grabbed Clara's hand that night and asked her to sit. Baby, I whispered. I need to ask you something. About when your dad was a baby. Do you know where he was born? She nodded. Grandma, I think Mom once said Dad was born in a rural clinic. Why? I swallowed hard. Because I was told I gave birth to a son in that same clinic, but I never held him. He was already washed and dressed when they handed him to me. I was too weak to question anything. I thought that was normal. Clara looked alarmed. You think they switched babies? I don't know anymore, I said with tears in my eyes. I just know that this family, this whole legacy is built on lies I never knew existed. The next morning, I called the old nurse registry office. By some miracle, one of the midwives from that clinic was still alive, living quietly just outside town. Clara and I drove there together. The old woman, Miss Jane, welcomed us with kind eyes. When I told her my name and story, she gasped. Grace Thompson, she asked. You gave birth during the storm. I remember it clearly. There were 2 babies born that night, one by you, and one by a young girl named Elsie. I leaned in. What happened to the babies? She hesitated. There was confusion. Elsie's child was supposed to go into care, but there was an argument. I was young then. I don't know who gave the final order, but the records were strange.
Ist daher.
Is it possible that I raised Elsie's baby instead of mine? Her face fell. I don't know for sure. Yes, it's possible. I turned to Clara. Her hand was over her mouth. It all made sense now. David's hatred. Peter's silence. The letters. The secrets. It wasn't just greed that poisoned our family. It was confusion, betrayal, and buried truth. That evening, I walked back into my home with a heavy but clearer heart. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like a survivor. And I wanted to tell my story, not just for me, but for every woman who had ever been erased, replaced, or silenced in her own home. I sat in my chair just as the sun was setting. Clara helped me set up the camera again. This time I looked straight into the lens and smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I was whole again. I spoke. Hello, dear hearts. My name is Grace Thompson. I was once the backbone of my family. Then I was thrown to the side, forgotten, erased, even replaced. They took my name. They took my home. They tried to take my soul. But I fought back. And the truth came out. I may never know if the son I raised was mine by blood. But I know this. I gave him my life. I gave this family everything I had. And if my story touched your heart, if you believe no grandma should ever be made to feel like a burden, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Because I still have stories to tell.